We have two guests with us. One is Randi, who spent most of her career as a forest geneticist with the U.S. federal government. She did 10 years at a national level in climate change programs, transitioned in 2017. So she was a trans woman running a federal climate change program during Trump's first administration. Retired when her agency was moved to Kansas City, and 75% of the people chose not to move with it. Lee is a retired Army Reserve officer and federal government employee with civilian corporate employment experience as well. In each case, Lee experienced sexual harassment, investigations under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and masked until finally was able to transition male, and has now, as a retired federal employee, each of these two are willing to come on here and be seen and be a voice and tell their story, pronouns and all, in the face of the flurry of executive orders that are trying to erase their existence. It is a very interesting, intriguing, informative, and calming conversation that I didn't see coming. And so I think you grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine or whatever your favorite libation is, sit down with your friends, and see how you feel at the end of this. You cannot be for racial equity and against any other marginalized voice in this country. It's a one, all for one for all situation when it comes to treating people with respect. If you have pockets of disrespect in you, that's your work to ferret out in 2025 so that we can be a collective voice evolving and get this train back on the track. Thanks for joining us. Today we have a special edition of One Voice Evolving, and we're dropping it on Wednesday because it's so timely and our guests are so unique that we just couldn't wait to get this out to you in real time in our country, in the United States. It is my intention to create a safe enough container that they will feel warm, welcomed, and secure enough to share their heart and their history and their hope for the future. This is resilience in action before we knew that was what we needed to be.
I mean, in theory, I'm safe because I'm retired, but that's just a theory because who knows what they can mess up next. Lee's in the same boat, so we're
commiserating.
Commiserating, and if anybody can speak truth with minimum retribution, it's those of us who are retired right now. I mean, I've got friends in the federal government who are in the process of losing their jobs.
Right.
Just for being associated with civil rights. Others who, were given okay to telework and now are expecting to travel halfway across the country to show up in an office they've never seen before. That's why I retired last time. So I didn't survive Trump 1.
And here we are for round 2.
Yeah.
This is so far out of the realm of the very tight racial equity that white women can do, but it's so important and it is so DEI. And the two of you who have dropped in my lap, this just feels to me like divine appointment. I don't know what's going to happen with it. And that's why I said, if we get to the end of this and we decide that that was a pretty meaty conversation that you'd rather not have your face or name attached to, then we will just release the audio. But
Yeah,
I'm telling you, just the fact that you're willing to do this, and
yeah,
I cry and I swear, like a sailor.
yeah, yeah. Well, Kim, if you Google my name in the Washington Post, you will find out that I've been written up with the Post in the Sunday edition in the Metro section with a full picture of me in there. So it's not like I'm good at hiding.
Awesome. Good.
I have
Well,
failed remarkably.
Good.
talking about hiding, I transitioned in front of, 34,000 people in the Corps of Engineers. And not only that, but, my mom and dad's church. I mean, they've been there for 40 years, at that church. And they all know my family's history. So with that, I mean, it's not like you can walk in and go, oh, some who don't really know the history or don't really know us very well, they do kind of question or they look at us kind of funny. But at the same time, not that I can hide.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And my transition was I was just leading a national climate change program when I did it. So,
Uh-huh.
it was, like I said, a trans woman running a federal climate change program in Trump 1. It was a great title to have.
Yeah.
Fun
Yeah.
times. Yeah.
It was a good job. It was good people. And but when they moved us to Kansas City, 3/4 of us said no, thank you.
Right.
Mhm.
So I retired.
There you go. Yeah. Do you think that was by design? Trump won?
Yeah, I'm sure God had his hand in it because I found a partner in a good place. I met people like Lee.
Yeah.
I don't, it was just before the pandemic started. I was able to do daycare, come up here where I am now, watch my grandson for 5 months so my daughter and her husband could work. So, I mean, it was God's timing. I was, like I said, if you look at the Washington Post article, I was pretty pissed off. But now I see it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Well, not the best, but it was a good thing.
Turned out well.
So
Yeah.
I'm in a good place.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah, I
do
think-
have options in Canada and Finland. Need be.
Yeah.
Well,
I
and it's
mean,
good to have
I think we all
options.
think that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's when friends in other countries said, if you need to come, that tells you something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
also the fact that the Canadian people all, have continually stated they're waiting for the influx of people.
Yeah, I'm waiting for them to build their wall.
Sooner rather than later. I saw yesterday that the passports, this passport rule has immediately been changed so that there's no longer an X.
Yeah, and if Lee and I
clarification.
were to try to renew our passports,
Yep.
our gender markers would be changed.
Yes.
Which is why I had 3 years left on mine. But last November, December, a few months ago, I renewed it anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to take the chance, and it was a wise move.
Can do. Good.
Yeah. There's a lot of things you have to prepare and um to protect yourself on or whatever.
Mhm.
In a way, I guess, just for the not that you like I said, not that I can hide, there's too many people that know me. Also, the fact that people on Facebook from my high school who know me, so it's kind of like, again, people,
Okay.
it's very hard to hide in that world. But at the same time, on the surface, if anybody comes or whatever, and you have paperwork that matches who you are, then
Exactly.
that's different. And that's kind of what the whole purpose of that is. But it's just more of protection than it is for anything, because
Right.
the people who, friends and family or whatever, they're not going to hopefully do anything. But at the same time,
Yeah.
Well, that greater element. Yeah.
And right now, Lee, I don't know how you feel, but I don't feel safe anywhere. I don't feel threatened in many places, but I don't feel safe anywhere.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. No, I think I don't feel unsafe. I feel a little nervous when I go into a restroom. But really, honestly, it was kind of proven to me the other day, and I don't mean to be crass or whatever, but I always think about myself waiting for a stall or whatever, and then I realized, I came out one day and there's two people waiting for the stall. and nobody was at the, the urinal. So it's just the fact of, okay, and what are the chances and the odds that both of them were transgender?
Yeah.
Not very much.
No.
So, because we're in, when people talk about the percentage of things, and the top percent of people, they have all this money and all the rest of that.
Mhm.
Technically, we're in a one percentage too, because only
Mhm.
1% of the, or less than, are
Yeah.
transgender. And also the fact of, we're also in 2% of the, we're 2%ers because we have PhDs.
Mhm.
So, it's kind of like we're in a very low percentage
I
of
love
things
it.
all the way across.
Yes.
And only, there's about 2 million as of December. There's about 2 million people in the civilian workforce for, um, yeah, I think, wait, hold on. As of December 24, there was 2 million people in the government workforce, not,
Okay.
civilian only, which is 1.87. Again,
Right.
very low percentage type of things, not on the big whole.
Right.
So that is a percentage of the entire workforce. So of across America. So, again, very small footprint of the government.
Yeah.
And I know they're worried about it, but I
They're
think,
very high
it's just
profile.
really, I think they're not telling the right stories.
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah.
telling the right information.
Right. And Lee,
Well, no.
I
Yeah.
also want to point out, we're a small percentage of retired people who are financially stable.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm.
you've seen my house. I think I've seen yours.
Nope. You've seen mine, but I haven't seen
Okay.
yours.
And I mean, we're,
Little backwards on that. I'm kidding.
well, we've invited you, I think. We won't go there. But the fact of the matter is, Lee and I are here because we have stability
Yes.
that seriously many, if not most, transgender people don't have.
Don't have.
We're not
Exactly.
worried about keeping our jobs. We're not, things
Mhm.
like that, where they need to stay under the radar. So you're talking to two people who are not only small percentages of education and government and trans, but you're talking to a small percentage of people who are trans who don't feel as threatened as, who feel much more threatened than we do.
Right.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I've got requests coming in. Where can I find a therapist? Where's their support?
Yeah.
From people who don't have the support we have.
Yeah.
So
And that's
I,
not, go ahead. I'm sorry.
when I was looking at when the possibility erupted that you could both be on, I've never done a threesome like this before, and I'm
Woo.
pretty excited about it. Yeah. And so I'm a child of the 60s. Come on. But you said it in the beginning. First of all, you both have white skin. So here we are, white people talking about, and the first lesson for my white audience of women over 40 who are inclined to want equity in this country is take that broad brush of whatever you want to paint on this conversation and dump it, because there are no two people who are going to speak for every race or
Absolutely.
every minimized voice or every anything. So take that out of the way. But what fascinates me about this is you are trans male and trans female, both in the federal government, both some military. And my question, and you brought it up, Randy, right at the beginning, when you said you don't feel safe anywhere. And Lee, you said, well, you don't really feel that. And I'm thinking, yes, because you are a clearly presenting white male
Yep.
in the bathroom. And Randy, you may not always be.
No.
And
There's only
so,
one person at risk when a trans woman is in the bathroom.
The
yeah,
trans woman.
It's the
boy,
trans
isn't
woman.
that the truth?
But
Yeah.
Randy,
And not usually from women, but that's shifting too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And um on that side of the bathroom part of it, if they tell us to go and use the bathroom of our birth gender, I've already seen a couple videos of men, and I walk in, do you really think, that's going to work well? And one of them said, hey, I just told your husbands, I'll say hi to you on the way, while I'm in here and stuff. And you think about that, it's kind of interesting. But Randy, you told me one time that it's interesting the dichotomy of the two of us. You are a white male with privilege, and you are a female. And white doesn't, that part doesn't matter. You are a female.
Yeah,
I
but
was
white
a
does get an
female, now I
advantage
am
over
white.
non-white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I think, and I think, we were talking to somebody else, Kim, the other day about the fact of the white privilege feeling it as we came into being our trans maleness and stuff. And I think one of it is that I own it a little bit more only because I was in the military, and
Yeah.
I had to own that.
Sure.
It wasn't easy because, there was a lot of things with being a female in the military,
Mhm.
but that command part or whatever allowed me to own that a little bit more. So when I did actually transition, I was able to own it a little bit more so than others and
Mhm.
stuff, unless they transition young coming up. So
Right. Right.
And I had an advantage too, Lee, because I had been working in my position for like 8 years, and the people I worked with knew me as male. And since we interpret the present based upon the past, because we can't think everything
yeah,
in new terms, when I'd sit in a meeting, they still heard male, even though I look cuter than I do now. We won't get there. But, I still carried some of that male privilege in workplaces that I had been in. When I get
Okay.
out of there and I pass,
Mhm.
holy cow, I'd never been mansplained before. It was, you ask a
yeah,
question at a conference and you're ignored, and a guy asks it two people later, and it's important. And my eyes were opened. I mean, being trans is really a blessing, Kim, because I have seen two sides. Most people only get one.
Right.
And I have experienced white male, cis, straight privilege,
mhm,
and I'm not experiencing that anymore. So I look at things now and I look at somebody who doesn't understand. And while I'm frustrated, it's like you can't see past your little glass bowl because I was there. So I mean, it's a blessing
Right.
as well.
And such an interesting thing because you are out of your body in your original privilege,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
And then you get your body aligned, but your
out
but
of your
your
privilege.
your
Mhm,
social stature changes
yeah,
mhm,
immensely. And I'm a career woman that fought her way up through all the things. We're having to fight all over again. Who saw
mhm,
that coming? And my motto was never let them see you sweat, never let them see you cry. And so you man up with the padded shoulders and all the things to
absolutely.
get through. So I understand that it would be easy, relatively easy for me to switch a role if that were my inclination. I could step into that privilege just fine because I've fought for it my whole life. Okay.
And you've lived that the whole, so they see
Yeah.
that. And yeah,
But
exactly.
but there is also that lived female experience of be still, be quiet, and don't make waves. And that's what I deal with our audience over 40. They're
Mhm,
just now starting to the caretaking mode has moved for a minute and they can actually say, who do I
yeah,
want to be when I grow up? And
mhm,
midlife transition is not an uncommon thing.
mhm,
And so it's like, but I have some trans uh, children in our family. We've got some of everything in our family. We're a blended family. And they trans female. And I looked at them like they'd grown a second head and said, why would you ever want to give up your perfect cis white male privilege for this? What that's when I accepted as a
mhm,
grandma. This is not gee, I decided to try it on for a
mhm.
while because
no,
nobody's going to go through that.
No, no,
Why
right,
would you?
right,
no.
absolutely.
We
And
could
that,
give you stories of
yeah,
what it takes, and it's
yeah.
yeah,
Well, you didn't come out as gay first, Randy. You were um
no. And I
straight
still
when
don't
you,
feel gay, Lee. I've always
No,
liked women, and I've never been considered gay until
I
now.
know exactly. So, but now you are. So you came out as two things at the same time, where I
Oh,
came out as, gay first, and then I came out as trans. And whereas some of my family actually, when I came out as gay, kind of like stood back and was like, what, and they had a hard time with it. But those same ones, now that I came out as trans, they're like, oh yeah, that's not a far cry. It's not like you
oh, we
jump,
saw that coming.
you know. So and it's true because most people when they interacted with me, that wasn't a question. In fact, there was a couple people who even said, I was curious when you were actually going to say it, realize it yourself. And not that I hadn't realized it, it was just getting that courage to be able to open that up because you have a lot of things riding on it in a sense. So, but yeah,
And well,
it,
for
it,
the world to catch up before it decided to revert back.
well, and it's interesting you say catch up because back in 2019, there was a women's fest here in Rehoboth, and but everything happens I mean, there's never a day that nothing happens in Rehoboth or Lewis or whatever. It's like everything's going on, but there was an executive from Pepsi who was gay, and she was talking about having to allow her family to catch up to her. She's
Mhm.
known it. And it made so much sense to me at that point because I hadn't yet come out to my family. And it was like, okay, I have to now, when I do, I have to let them catch up to me. And
Yeah.
that made so much sense because I've known this all along. I've figured this out. I
Yeah.
had to not help my wife
Mhm.
had to catch up to me a little bit as
Yeah.
well. But
But Lee, even though you've known it your whole life, for you to actually go through with
right,
it was not an instant decision. It
no, it was
probably
not.
took years
Right.
struggling.
Well, and that's the thing too with kids. People think, oh, it's out of the blue. Where did it come from? Somebody actually did a study and understood that kids don't just do it out of the blue. Half the time now that they have an internet, we didn't.
Yeah.
And our encyclopedia was, trying to ask anybody or whatever, go to the library and quietly look for something. But they have internet and they can look and they can study and they can research on their own to find out about themselves. And then they come out and it seems like out of the blue for everybody else. Again, the families have to catch up. That person already knows. They're figuring it out all together. And it still has to go through the figuration of what that dichotomy is with the family. But at the same time, it's not like those of us who have lived a life up until 60 years old
Mhm.
and now we come out and that somewhat sometimes seems out of the blue and it's not.
Right.
So
Yeah, because Lee, I don't know about you, but this has been on my mind since elementary school, at least,
mhm. Well, yeah, I didn't understand it. I was like, I don't get it. Why are they calling me a girl? I thought,
Yeah.
I played with the guys. I did football, baseball. I did army, all these things, right?
Yeah.
And then my body, betrayed me. And I was like, wait, what does this mean? But then again, now that even that happens, then all of a sudden I realize, oh wait, why? I mean, I really like women. I prefer to be in their company. I didn't really like to be with the men or whatever, except for the, let's go do things, But and even my dad kind of figured it out. He gave me football helmets. He gave me rifles. He had we played base football and baseball together or whatever. I mean, he kind of figured that out. So, but I think it was just he wasn't sure if it was a phase or whatever. He allowed that. My mom was a little bit more reserved on it.
Yeah.
So
But Lee, society maybe not disapproved of it, but they probably gave you a look of, I
they
mean,
didn't understand it.
no. Well, and here's the thing with trans. I remember in high school, in our health class, we are talking about mental health, and everybody got to pick a mental health disease. And I picked whatever transgender was at the time. I don't know what, I forgot what we called it.
Yeah.
And, we were able to come and present as what it was. And I looked at that and said, no, because what I had was a severe, terrible mental condition, according to my textbook.
Yeah.
You want to talk about just being scared to death, knowing that I had a very bad mental illness. I needed to stuff it.
Yeah.
And then, fundamentalism for, the next 40 years, there's guilt and shame there too. So
I have a question. I have a question for you, Randy, because you drop these seeds and then we just move on and it's like, yeah, I don't want to forget a thing. And so I want to know, when we were talking about privilege, we were talking about that the male privilege to the different experience of being a female in the workplace. What was the most surprising or challenging for you other than the mansplaining?
My first time traveling as a woman for business. Holy crap. I need the makeup. I need extra shoes. All right. Though just the practical things kind of caught me off guard. I mean, fortunately, I had the women in the neighborhood when I transitioned, and I always walked dogs with them. So it was like, yeah, we weren't expecting it, but sure, you've always been part of us. I had great women friends at work. And if you look at most of my papers, the co-authors surprisingly are female. So I've had support around me. So at work, I did not experience really anything hard. I had established myself, although the woman will make it perfectly clear, I cheated because I moved up the ladder and then switched at the top, okay? They didn't think any less of me, but they wanted me to understand
that's not
my route was different than theirs. But I mean, the interesting thing was just walking in with the change. It wasn't so much, it was like you'd walk into a room after transition and the whole room just kind of went, bzzz, what are we going to do? Because it wasn't something they were used to. And that brought all attention to you. And you felt like you became the center of attention when I'm just in an interagency meeting where we got work to do. And probably the best thing that ever happened, I was at one meeting and a colleague walked in from another agency, looked over at me and just goes, Randy, you look different these days. And it broke the tension just like that. And so for me, it wasn't at work. It wasn't struggling with being a woman other than struggling with the change and people looking at me like, huh? Because I had, like I said, we interpret the present based upon the past, and that past enabled me to continue to do my work and honestly, to be listened to as a male. And that, I mean, don't get me wrong, it didn't always work.
One of the things that our audience can clearly see is the different, how privileged you are to be willing in this day, put your face on screen and talk about this, particularly as former government employees. So I want you to just riddle me this I see that you have your she, her pronouns up, and I saw this morning that the she, her pronouns were directed to be taken off. They're off of all websites. They're not allowed to be used. People who are being laid off or affected by this are on a gag order for social media. They're not allowed to do that. And so they're resisting or rebelling, or they're doing what we're all sitting here in the United States now wondering, if you're not part of that 47%, is do I lay low or do I get louder, or do I, what does resilience look like today? And I'd like to know about, you've had different experiences, but Lee, you particularly, you were female in the military, I understand, before, when it was don't ask, don't tell.
Absolutely. Yep. Almost my whole career.
Yeah. And so you faced a lot of, I would think, backlash or hiding, or can you tell us about that experience in addition to?
I was actually investigated. But when I was down at basic in Fort Knox, somebody accused another female of being gay, and that wasn't don't ask, don't tell then. That was a witch hunt. And they, did you see any of this? None of us are going to go, no, yeah. But they did pull one person out, and that person was no longer in basic, and I believe they no longer are in the military, that type of thing. But a lot of us seeing that, zip, and at that point. But when I was after 9/11, I was in California at 9/11, and I was a reservist, so I was working at a civilian corporation at the time. I had orders then to go to the Pentagon because that's where my job was. And most of us were holed up at the time in the Residence Inn right across from the Pentagon on Army Navy Drive in Washington, Virginia, right there. And one of the guys found out my birthday and came to my room with some flowers. Now, he had other ideas, um, but on the counter was a picture now of my partner, her two kids, and myself. Now, it was taken at a go away party. Okay. And the fact is that you can have pictures with friend or whatever, but he looked over and he said, "Oh, who's that?" Now, I could have said, my roommate, because technically I was paying rent and stuff. And, or I could have, at that point, a lot of the jargon was my girlfriend or whatever, but I wasn't meaning it in that regard or whatever. So he went and he told the command that I had told him I was a lesbian. And I did not. I did not use those words. And it for 6 months, they talked to everybody around the Army Operations Center. They, interviewed me. And my actual command, he was in the same command. I mean, the office, he was in the same office. We were both engineers on that desk. Um, and it was just hell. But little did I know who all knew what was going on. And apparently everybody in the AOC knew what was going on. But one of the things they couldn't do, ask me directly, am I gay? They could ask me everything else. But the one thing they couldn't do, and people say, oh, don't ask, don't tell was bad. No, that's what saved my career, because they could not ask me if I was gay.
Wow.
So, and it was really interesting for that purpose. No, 6 months later, it was a colonel that did not really like women in the military anyhow, but he said, nothing is founded, shred everything and let it go. And, after you have been tensed up the whole 6 months, but I immediately, I got a call and I immediately got sick because it was all that tension just went out like that. But the fact is that I was now on edge. No matter what I did, I went right back into the closet in that regard. Everything I did, I had to watch who was around me, what was going on, all the rest of this. In fact, I'm retired in June of 2013. 2014, I was dating Marianne before we got married. We were at a restaurant and she put her hand on mine and I pulled it away. That's how much it affected me. I'm not even part of the, wasn't even being paid at the time because reservists have to wait, but that's the whole point. It wasn't even, it had been repealed, all the rest of that, but it didn't matter. That 30 years of hiding, I just pulled it away. And it took me a moment going, okay, I'm sorry, and but it does stay with you. And you do look around going, who's around me, all the rest of that. So yeah, it was not easy. But I also have the wonderful experience of being sexually harassed, not only in the military, but also in civilian corporation side. So it was, and that knowing that coming into who I am authentically, I get very, very angry when somebody else is doing that. And you know, my male privilege wants to go up and just pummel the other people. So
when I was old enough to experience sexual harassment and know I had recourse, which was 20 years after I'd been in the workforce.
Mhm.
Okay. And the EEOC was what I navigated to get my right to sue letter. It took years. So you had to be in for the long haul. You had to be serious. You had to have a case. What do you think? How are you feeling about the EEOC being part of what's being popped out of this little puzzle? No DEI, no affirmative action, no EEOC. What happens if there's harassment now, as before they get all the women out of the command positions or whatever?
Having been in the positions I've been in, um, not only with the military that way, but now also with the civilian government, and having to use the EEO and HR part of that or whatever. And I was working as an executive officer, and my boss had to get rid of somebody who was only being promoted just to get push off to somebody else.
Yeah.
And it does happen. But she was able to, but it took a year. It actually full time, it took 2 years. But you had to have all that documentation and everything else. But we were guided by the rules and regulations and everything else of what we couldn't do, what we, could say, couldn't say, do whatever. But having to be in front of that person, being interviewed for a with the lawyer and everything else, that whole thing, I can only imagine not having that ability to have anybody support that or whatever, and anybody can say anything and it goes away. I mean, you go away, they go away. You don't have a recourse. You don't have any support. You don't, and we had the support for that part. But I've seen it also on the other side where I've known people that they had the support because of somebody else above them. So, it's not going to be pretty. Let's put it that way.
I mean, I'm looking at a president and cabinet members already accused of sexual assault, some convicted. It's not a problem for the government at higher levels anymore. And, it's going to flow down. Like I've told you, I'm so thankful to be retired and out of it, because it's just going to get worse. I mean, it's this administration is about white, male, cis, hetero privilege, especially if you're wealthy. And the three of us here, well, Lee, you're there now, not the cis and hetero, but you're at least white male, okay?
Technically hetero, I have a wife, yes.
That's true. All right, that's right. Just like I'm gay now and I have a female partner, but it's confusing. But, so I don't know. I mean, I can't fathom what's going to happen. And you said, anger, fear, what are we going through? Both. Some days I want to get up on my soapbox and just prophesy to these idiots what's going on. And other days I want to close the door in the shades and just hide. And today you're lucky.
I am.
The windows are open. I've come out. But you have to understand just the shock knowing that neighbors I thought I could trust are voting for somebody who wants to take away my privilege of being. Who voted for somebody with no compassion. I mean, him getting mad at the bishop who just asked him to be merciful, which is a Christian thing to do. And all of a sudden something's wrong with that. I mean, I don't know how to respond. So you asked me, what's my response? It's confusion, it's disbelief, it's despair at times. And I'm just thankful I can hide when and if I need to, and I do.
Right. Just because I'm asking questions, A, doesn't mean you have to answer them. And B, it means that if you answer something and it's off the record, I'm the one, I am the first edit through here, so,
Okay.
but I'm gonna just ask what I need to ask when I do. The people I've talked to from the government so far, that I know who've had careers, are all, I can't tell who's in denial, them or me. Because they're like, we've seen presidents come and go. It's like the people who didn't vote or the people who voted the other way. The president never really impacts my life. It doesn't matter who it is. It's all crooked. It's all corrupt. It's all rigged. So it doesn't, if it doesn't bother my bubble, it doesn't bother me. It's not my circus, not my monkeys. But when it comes to this government stuff, because this stuff is popping so fast, so extreme, and so pointedly against marginalized voices, particularly, that is it reasonable to think, given what we've seen, not from our history or precedent, because there is no precedent for this. This is, well, we'll give him that. He is uniquely damaging. Okay. Do we think that our idea of how the government, it protects us and our retirement and our children and our culture and our rights is going to hold?
No.
It can't.
No, I agree. It's pretty much a no. However,
Right.
it's not going to be. It's going to be a fight. There are, like you said, rules, water, whatever. There's a difference between laws, acts, and constitutional amendments.
Okay.
Acts can be overturned. Laws can be written off. Constitutional amendments are pretty much substantiated. It takes a lot to take something away from the Constitution as much as it is hard to get something ratified. It takes a lot of effort and things, and so
But
for
Lee,
him just to, yeah.
There's a felon in the office of president.
No, I know. That's why I'm saying what I'm saying.
Constitution, okay?
No,
It's hard,
exactly that.
But we've seen it.
Absolutely. And there were steps to be in the Constitution to prevent him. But
And they
again,
use it.
things are, bent, broken, and cut. Those are three things that are being done at this point with a lot of the laws, the acts, and the amendments. There are things that, yes, are going to seem immediate, but even like Oberfell, I can't even remember how to pronounce it. That where if they overturn it, that's going to be within a year. So it's not like going to be tomorrow or whatever, because they don't resume. And so it takes a while for that to go through. And, there's certain laws or whatever that he can do, but as far as acts, those things have to be overturned by Supreme Courts and this, that, and the other. So is he influential? Yes. Is he going to push it? Yes. Is the Republicans have the hold on, Congress and the House and Senate at this point? Yes. However, there are pushbacks. And you're going to see those fights, and you're going to see people be vocal, and you're going to see those things come about. And we are going to have both sides. We're going to have those who are talking, preaching to the choir, and those that are, it's kind of like, it's going to fall on deaf ears. I can't say that I liked everything Biden did. I can't say I liked everything any end of the presidents ever did.
Yeah.
And so maybe they're not the best president, but they were not without compassion. Even Reagan and the Bush and they all had compassion. They all had empathy. They all understood, what it meant to lose somebody, something. And when those things came about, and maybe he wasn't the best president during 9/11, but he had compassion and he had empathy. And that's what came out. And that made him a great person for that, because he had that. And I only think now, looking at the pandemic, we didn't have that compassion and empathy or
Mhm.
any part of that. So
Mhm.
yes, are there things that are going to happen, and can he write things or whatever? Yes, but there are certain things that are going to have to be actually won't go further than a certain amount because they take ratification, just like Don't Ask to Tell took a ratification.
Right. Right.
It had to go through, it had to, it
Mhm.
certain things can't just be stated, this is it, by a pen. It takes, and some courts will block things. In fact, that's already happening and stuff.
Mhm. Yeah. So let me ask you this. There, Randy's back. Okay. Thank you. All right. Resilience is what we're talking about. And you each exemplify resilience to have made it through this much of your journey in this lifetime, no matter who was president, no matter whatever. If you were talking to somebody 20 to 40 years younger than you, whether they're just thinking about getting into government or whether they're mid-career, what you are the voices, you may be the only voices they're ever going to hear about this outside of the bubble that they're in or the fear factor.
Yeah.
How would you guide them? What would you tell them?
Finding your voice is very important. Finding who you are is more important. And if you can't seem to find your voice, it's not a bad thing. We understand, but those who can need to speak out. Everybody has, it's kind of this what you find in a church. Everybody has different gifts,
Mhm.
sowing, reaping, whatever. Not everybody is going to be in the same part of the ministry. That doesn't happen because it's just different for different people. The same thing with any walk of life. I can't tell you what it feels like to be blind,
Mhm.
deaf,
Mhm.
black, Asian.
Mhm.
I can tell you what it feels like to have a physical impairment,
Mhm.
okay, and going through a military career with a physical impairment. I can
Mhm.
tell you what it feels like to be gay
Mhm.
and transgender
Mhm.
and scared and all these other things or whatever, but those are the voices I can state. So if I'm going to talk to somebody who's younger, I want them to understand that they have to find that within themselves. Nobody can find that for them. And that's something that, I give a lot of credit to Jazz. I don't remember her last name, from I Am Jazz. I mean, she's amazing
Mhm.
for finding her voice as early as she did and stuff. And I think that that's one of the reasons I am so adamant about doing podcasts like this, doing in my blog, because those are the things I have to say. Those are the things somebody out there is going to find it and read it or whatever. And it goes back to what Andrew Solomon said. It's nearly impossible to hate somebody whose story you know. And that is your voice. Your story is your voice. There's a lot of people, there's a book, and if a lot of people want to find a voice,
Mhm.
it's called Great LGBTQ plus Speeches.
Oh, okay.
And these are from everybody, Barack Obama, Harvey
Mhm.
Milk, a lot of people.
Mhm.
And just the fact of in there, they're talking about finding their voice, finding themselves.
Like Lee, I can only tell them my story. Okay. And my story is I worked for the New Zealand government for 3.5 years, worked for the federal government for 28. And for all but one of those years, it was a good career. You know, understand the government works slow. If you're impatient, might not want to do this. Uh, but so, yeah, I mean, I do not know the current situation within the government as of today. I know
Mhm.
friends are losing jobs because they were involved in civil rights and DEI. I know
Mhm.
I have friends losing jobs because they refuse to relocate. Uh, you know, I would just give people those warnings.
Mhm.
But I have sat before grad students coming in because I was part of an organization that gave grants to universities. And they'd
Mhm.
come in and they said, "Well, what do you want to tell these young people?" And mine always was, plan A will never come into effect. Your views and what you think you're going to do in 15 years, it's great to have those ambitions, but odds are you'll be doing something different.
Mhm.
You have to be flexible.
Mhm.
And other people I've talked to lately, I just explained to them a job decision's not permanent. You know,
Mhm.
if it works out, fine. If not, find another job. And I've had to tell myself that before too. When, you know, I was losing a job in the government and was going to have to go back to New Zealand, and I was just feeling down. I was like, but anything I do is not a permanent decision.
Mhm.
So if you want to work for the federal government, be aware of the limitations.
Mhm.
Lee and I are both retired. We don't have the old pension, but we have the new one, which is more than most of the people in my neighborhood. Okay. Federal government was very good to me. I had a wonderful career. Like I said, I'm spoiled rotten. And I wish everybody could have that story, and many don't. But
Mhm.
I can only tell my story.
I think about Mr. Rogers' neighborhood,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Look for
We're
the
old enough to
helpers.
know that. We're all
Look,
three old enough to understand.
that's
Yeah.
right. Look for the helpers whenever bad
Mhm.
stuff happens,
Mhm.
and there are helpers. And I think about my 12-step background. When you focus on the problem increases. When you
Mhm.
focus on the
Mhm.
solution increases. So that's where I put my head. Um, and I just wrote 2 days ago to somebody around one of these Trumpian slips that said you can take DEI out of the government or out of the regs, but you cannot take diversity out of the people. Nice try.
That's very true.
And
You know,
that's
this
how I
country
feel.
was based that way.
Yeah.
I mean, Hakeem Jeffries, I love listening to him because very much like a Barack Obama type of thing, but he said diversity, equity, inclusion are American values.
Mhm.
The model of the United States of America is e pluribus unum, out of many, one. That's diversity. The 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, one of the most important amendments in our country, provides equal protection under the law. That's equity. And in that pledge, we promise one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's inclusion. So it's not complicated. Diversity, equity, inclusion are the American values. And if you, I mean, what about, I've heard many people going back to that. One nation under God. Okay, you just told me you do not understand, you know, DEI. And the other part is we're all immigrants at one point.
Right. Right. Well, and I had an altercation with my landlord here where we live because they put up somebody was allowed to put up a flagpole. And I was waiting to see what kind of flag are we going to fly. And so I called my landlord and I said, so we're allowed to have flagpoles now. And if I want to fly a flag, I want to know what the regs are. What am I allowed to do? Well, it's a case by case basis. And the bottom line of our discussion was they reserve the right to decide what's American enough. So it has to be a
Wow.
flag, and a POW flag would be okay because they think that's American. But if I flew it upside down, they might have a problem with it. What about an Israeli flag? Ooh, I'd have to think about that. And so we didn't even get to Ukraine. It was just,
Yeah.
it just took my mind and exploded it with the amount of bias and privilege that is built into the systems,
Yes,
including
absolutely.
my little, blue dot in a red bubble over here. So thank you
No,
so much for your time and your energy today. I can't thank you enough. And if you have anything else you'd like to add, by all means, just
no, I appreciate the
oh,
opportunity. To me, the more people speak, the it's the same thing that happened in Vietnam, you know, for the Vietnam War or whatever. The more people speak, the more people listen. And that's actually what turned the tide of us getting out of Vietnam. It was the
Right.
more people spoke, the more people listened. And I'm not being political whether we should be there or not. It's just the fact that when you have a thought, you need to speak it. As long
Well,
as
and
it's
it's
not hurting
important to
anybody.
have that coming from behind the curtain, you know, from people with boots on the ground, as it were.
And I appreciate the opportunity to
Yeah.
speak with you, Kim. I mean, as Lee says, it's being silent is not an option right now. And all we can tell you is our story. And if that makes a difference in somebody's lives, because bottom line, I learned this the hard way. Okay. I was a scientist most of my career, spent my life publishing boring peer-reviewed journals that talked about facts. Facts don't change beliefs. Experiences change beliefs, and stories are more of an experience than me sending you an Excel spreadsheet with a bar chart. So thank you for the opportunity to tell our stories.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.